In the days of old, when families arranged marriages, parents chose suitable partners for their daughters and sons, and monarchs selected royal matches for their princes and princesses, lived Princess Ola. Princess Ola dreamed of love, not duty. She has a fierce love for Ikenna, a young man whose world was vastly different from hers. Ikenna was neither prince nor noble. He was the son of a humble farmer with no title or fortune. To meet him, Ola told lies. She knew well the dangers that threatened if anyone ever discovered her secret affair with the farmer's son. Her father, the king, would never permit his daughter to love a man so far beneath their status. One day, she told her father that she was going to the stream with her maids, but had on this day stayed out longer than usual. She had lost herself in the moment with Ikenna that she did not know it was dusk. But just as she turned to leave, she heard the sound of heavy footsteps behind them. The king's guards had come. The guards led her alongside her mates back to the palace. When they arrived at the palace, they met the king sitting in his chamber. The princess wanted to take a back route to her hut, but the king called and asked her where she had been for so long. She told him that she had only been at the stream. "You are a princess, Ola. A princess must not be found wandering the village. There are princes across the land who seek your hand. Do you wish to embarrass your family?" the king asked. He reprimanded the princess, but she remained calm and didn't reveal the truth. Days passed, and Ola was confined to the palace and watched more closely than before. But her love for Ikenna only grew in their separation. When she was finally allowed to leave the palace, she went to the stream once more, and there Ikenna waited. She told him what had happened in the past few days, and he told her that it was too dangerous coming out to see him. "I don't want you to suffer because of me," he said. But Ola only held him tighter. "Without you, I feel no freedom at all," she said. One morning, Ola's father summoned her to the throne room to remind her of Aku Festival, which would soon be held in her honor. Aku Festival was an event to which the most eligible princes would be invited. And by the end of the festival, the princess will have to choose a suitor. The king finally told her that it was time she understood her role as a princess. Princess Ola managed only a nod before retreating to her chambers, where the walls seemed to close in around her. This festival could mean the end of her freedom and of her love with Ikenna. That night, she could not sleep. She remembered her late aunt, a woman who once dared to love a commoner. Her aunt had pleaded to marry for love, but the king had denied her and then forced her into a union with a wealthy but cold prince. In the end, her aunt died of harsh treatments in the marriage. Ola knew that history was about to repeat itself, and she would have to find a way to break free. Not just for herself, but for the memory of those who had suffered before her. The day before the festival, Ola's mother, the queen, entered her chamber. She knew her daughter had been seeing the farmer's son, but had been quiet about it until now. She could not keep calm any longer, not with Aku Festival just around the corner. "Ola, you must be careful. Your father suspects something. I understand what it is to want something else from life, but you cannot throw away the future that has been given to you," the queen said. Her mother's warning stirred up her sorrow. Her mother, though bound in a loveless marriage, had once dreamed of another life. The morning of the festival, Ola managed to steal away to the stream for what she feared might be the last time. Ikenna was there, waiting for her with his face clouded with worry. "Ola, my love, if this is the end, know that I will never forget you," he said. But Ola shook her head. "It doesn't have to be the end. I won't choose any of them. My heart belongs to you," the princess said. She asked him to attend the festival and promised to choose him, which would leave the king no option but to consent to their marriage. But Ikenna told her that he daren't risk it, lest the king have him beheaded. Ola held his hand and promised that no matter what happened, she would try to find a way to be with him. Back in the palace, the festival had already begun. Princes from far and wide gathered. Each had with him gifts and pledges of devotion. Ola was dressed and adorned with jewels, yet she felt like a stranger in her own body. Though she endured each introduction and ritual with a calm appearance, she longed only for Ikenna. One by one, Ola received the princes with fake smiles and then politely dismissed each one in turn. As the festival continued, a man emerged from the crowd. It was Ikenna. He had risked everything to be there, knowing that only a public declaration could save their love. Ola seized the moment and took his hand. "I choose him," she declared. "I choose Ikenna. He is my heart's desire, the one I wish to spend my life with." The villagers erupted in joy, but the king was unhappy. He ordered his men to seize and throw Ikenna out of the palace. Ikenna was immediately seized and thrown out of the palace. The king threatened his family with imprisonment if he dared return. Princess Ola was dragged to her hut. "You are a disgrace to this family, Ola. You will choose a prince, or you will be confined until you've received sense. This commoner is not fit to walk among royalty, let alone be your husband," the king said. Ola lay on the floor of her hut. Though her heart was broken, she refused to give up on her love for Ikenna. The king's patience was wearing thin, and Ola could feel his fury even as she sat in her hut. She knew that her defiance had put her future and Ikenna's in grave danger. The king declared his ultimatum. Ola would have until the end of the festival to choose a prince, or she would be disowned. Fear gripped her as she heard that, but then her resolve strengthened. She would rather face any consequence than live a lie in a loveless marriage. She said her heart belonged to Ikenna, and she would honor that love. Late that night, her loyal handmaiden Ugomma sneaked into her chamber and told her that the king was planning to confine her if she didn't choose a prince soon. Ugomma, knowing that Ola's love for Ikenna was strong, urged her to find a way to escape before the king's plan could take effect. Ola was grateful for her maid's support. She prepared herself for the escape. Although she knew not what the future held, but she knew that anything was better than a life lived without love. The princess escaped from the palace without the knowledge of the king and his guards, and reached the outskirts of the village where Ikenna awaited her. He took her hand, and together they left the village, sacrificing everything to be together. They journeyed far from the palace and settled in a small village where they could live in peace, far from the prying eyes of royalty. Though life was challenging, Ola felt fulfilled. She found strength in her love for Ikenna and the humble life they built together. Back at the palace, the king's wrath had not subsided. Unable to punish Ikenna directly, he turned his anger towards his family and accused them of dishonoring the royal house. Ikenna's parents were stripped of their land and sentenced to serve as royal servants. News of this cruel punishment reached Ola and Ikenna. Ola's heart broke for Ikenna's parents, who had been caught in the crossfire of her father's vengeance. As they adapt to their new life, they constantly watched their backs, knowing the king would possibly seek them out. The princess recalled her mother's words, urging her to follow duty over love. Her mother had not known freedom or choice. She was bound by the marriage of alliance rather than affection. Now that they had left the kingdom, Ola was determined to break that pattern, not just for herself, but for all those bound by tradition's chain. She confided in Ikenna, and together they vowed to live their lives as an example of love, freely choosing, and a union of hearts, not titles. Back in the palace, the king's bitterness over Ola's rebellion had begun to fade. He was sad that his once proud daughter had vanished, leaving him to reflect on the loveless marriages he himself had endured. The king wondered if he had been wrong to deny Ola her happiness, and then resolved to finding his princess. He sent out his guards not to punish her, but to make peace and acknowledge her choice, if only he could bring her home. Months passed and Ola discovered she was carrying their child. The thought of having a child brought them excitement. Their happiness, however, was tinged with worry. Ikenna knew his family was still under the king's terror, and Ola feared the father's search would eventually reach them. The king disguised his guards and sent them into villages far and wide, looking for any sign of the runaway princess. He no longer cared about titles or alliances. He wanted his daughter's forgiveness and perhaps to witness the love he had once been so quick to condemn. The king had seen commoners who chose each other out of love, not duty, and had realized he had been blind to the richness of a life shared by choice. One afternoon, the king's disguised guards arrived in the village where Ola and Ikenna lived. They questioned the villagers but found no trace of the royal daughter. Ola spotted them from a distance but managed to remain hidden. When they left, she felt both relief and guilt. Later that evening, she told Ikenna that they cannot hide forever. One day, we will have to face my father's world again, for our child's sake, she said. Finally, word reached the king of a young couple hidden in a small village who might be the ones he sought. The king, in the company of his elders and guards, arrived the village in secrecy and was led to a hut where for the first time in months he saw his daughter. The sight of her with a child brought tears to his eyes. Ola, startled to see him, held her ground, scared of his reaction. But to her surprise, he approached her with an embrace as he spoke with regret. I have come not to demand, but to understand and bless what I once condemned, he said. As the princess and the king spoke, Ikenna joined them, prepared to defend their love if necessary. But instead of anger, the king looked at him with quiet acceptance and then confessed his mistakes and admitted that he had been wrong to stand in the way of love. Ola noticed the humility in the way he spoke and embraced him. The king's acceptance gave them hope that perhaps the tradition that had bound so many could be broken, replaced by love and choice. They returned to the palace, and in a public act of reconciliation, the king freed Ikenna's parents from their duties, returned their land, and granted them honor for the sacrifices they had made. The king called the kingdom to respect and honor all unions, regardless of rank or wealth. The people celebrated the king's change of heart. With the king's blessing, Princess Ola and Ikenna were welcomed by the family and villagers alike. They spoke to the people of love and the importance of choosing one's partner freely, setting an example that resonates throughout the kingdom. Ola's pregnancy reached its final stages, and she gave birth to a daughter. The king marveled at his grandchild, named her Ihunanya Kamma, which means love is best. He saw in her a promise of unity and love that would guide the kingdom for generations to come. To honor Ola and Ikenna's union, the king planned a ceremony for them to properly get married. The ceremony was attended by people from all walks of life. Love, unity, and freedom to choose one's partner was celebrated in the ceremony. Not everyone welcomed the changes. The kingdom's council, long accustomed to preserving the old ways, resisted the idea of marriages based on love. They argued that alliances were essential for maintaining peace and strength. But the king, moved by his daughter's journey, stood firm. He decreed that all individuals in the kingdom would henceforth have the right to choose their partners, and that no one would be forced into marriage against their will. The council's power was waned, and the king's authority gave the people a voice they had never known. At the palace, an old woman shared her own story of a love lost to tradition. The woman spoke of being forced into marriage that had brought her only sorrow. She had spent her youth wishing she could have followed her heart instead. The king promised the woman and other maidens that the kingdom's future would honor love, not wealth or status. He enacted a new law that no marriage could be arranged without the willing consent of both parties. From that day henceforth, the people abided by the rule, and marriages became more loving than dutiful.